everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Delta Waterfowl's The Voice of the Duck Hunter podcast. On today's episode, I sat down with Mr. Mojo himself, Terry Denmon, to discuss the early history of spinning wing decoys and the trial and error process that led to the modern-day success story of MOJO Outdoors. Terry is a passionate hunter and conservationist. Listen in to hear all about the man behind the Mojo. With that introduction, I wanted to bring in today's guest, Terry Denmon. Terry Denmon, you are the founder, I would imagine, right, of MOJO Outdoors.
I'm one of three founding partners. The other two partners have elected to get out of the business, so there were three of us, now there's one.
So co-founder, but the sole owner. So that's pretty exciting. So Terry, I'd always like people to get to know our guests personally, and then jump into, kind of the subject of the day. So I understand you as to be a lifelong waterfowl hunter, but Terry, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, some of your background, and maybe what, brought us to this conversation today?
Sure, I'll be glad to, Joel, and I'm glad to be here. I hate I couldn't be there in person. I've been keeping up with the chatter on social media, so you're making a pretty good splash on social media, so obviously you have a very important event going on. But as to me, I grew up in northeast Louisiana, which is a state and an area of the state that's very rich in all kinds of different hunting, waterfowl being one of them. And then when I left home, I went to engineering school, became an engineer, eventually went into the engineering business, and I've actually spent most of my life operating an engineering firm here in Monroe, Louisiana. We kind of sort of refer to ourselves as Duck City, USA. We have Duck Commander, Duck Dynasty, Mojo, got a lot of duck things going on in Monroe, Louisiana. But I've been here for quite a number of years, and then, but I hunted all along. Naturally, in the early beginnings, I just could hunt locally. We didn't have access to very much equipment back then. We didn't have very much money or anything back then, but we had a lot of places we could hunt. I could actually walk out the back door of our house and pick up a gun and go hunting, so that was a pretty good learning experience for me. And then as life went on, I got to where I could hunt more. And I've been hunting. I've been duck hunting on a number of different continents in a lot of different states and different countries, and it's been a very rewarding experience. But I've also done a lot of big game hunting. I always loved big game hunting, so I've done that. I've been to Africa 7 times, I think. The one time I went over there purely waterfowl hunting, so that was a great experience. But I've just kind of matured in this part of the world, and along the way, I was fortunate enough to get involved in MOJO and the spinning wing decoy concept, and from then on into motion decoys and a variety of other products. And I spend a good bit of my time now, just working on new products. And so that kind of brings me to where I am today.
That's an impressive story. I think you kind of glossed over one part of it. You talked about being an engineer, a hunter, owner of MOJO. But my first introduction to you, Terry, was you were a commissioner on the Louisiana Wildlife Commission. Is that right?
That is correct. I had a 6-year commission on the commission, which by our Constitution is as long as a person can serve. You get appointed on there by the governor, and it's a 7-person commission, and that was a extremely interesting experience, especially for me. I was pretty well versed in recreational hunting and recreational fishing, but Louisiana is the #1 commercial fishing state in the union, #1 fur trapping state in the union. We got all the shrimp and oysters and clams and crabs and those kind of things, and I didn't know very much about that. Alligators and things like that, so it was extremely interesting.
And what was your specialty? Because as I understand it, the governor selects many of the individuals based on a unique talent or a unique viewpoint. What was yours?
Mine was recreational hunting and fishing. As I said before, I really didn't know a whole lot about the commercial aspect of it, especially that along the marsh and out into the Gulf, and but there are people that are appointed to the commission that just represent certain industries. Someone will be appointed that will represent the shrimping industry, which is very big in Louisiana. Somebody is appointed to represent the alligator industry. In fact, I was on the commission with the person that was the largest alligator farmer in the state of Louisiana at the time. So that's a wealth of information that you can learn from.
What was his name? I forget.
I forget too.
Well,
and he's a friend of mine. I hate that, but
put you on the spot.
Yeah,
we'll forget
lawyers
together.
Told me of all the things I lost, I miss my memory the most. I cannot remember that guy's name. He got a Cajun name, and they're hard to remember anyway.
Yeah, I do remember because I've lived in the Midwest, born and raised in Wisconsin, spent a little bit of time in Minnesota, and then I've been 20-some years in North Dakota. And, of course, we don't have alligators in that part of the world, and so I did find it particularly fascinating, the shrimping perspective, the gator farming. Oh, I almost remembered his name, but I'll probably remember it afterwards. But anyway, so that I do want to thank you for that, and I think Louisiana hunters should thank you for that. That's quite a time commitment, the monthly meetings, and obviously the phone calls and conversations that you have on behalf of the natural resources in Louisiana.
Yeah, there's a lot more things going on that commission than I realized before I got on it. It's a very complicated process, and it touches a lot of different things. It touches a lot of people's lives actually. But when you take all the different things that have to do with wildlife and fisheries, it's a very broad subject.
Yeah, and a lot of opinionated folks, right? And there's a lot of energy, a lot of emotion that can come with that.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, when you get into the commercial aspect of it, you are now messing with people's lives, their livelihood. That's extremely important to them. However, hunting and fishing, I think maybe hunting a little more than fishing, it's such a sport of passion that it's amazing the passion that those people came to the commission with, and with some kind of request or ask us to do something or something like that. And actually, for my experience, about somewhere in the middle of my 6 years, it kind of came to me that most of the regulations that we had, which are thousands, were what I learned to call "thou shalt not." Most of the regulations say you can't do this and you can't do this and you can't hunt with this and you can't hunt at this time and you can't hunt with that. And it kind of got me into a mindset that hunters in the United States were down to 5% of the population buys a hunting license. So we were on the verge of becoming irrelevant in the political world. So I kind of started a crusade that said, look, let's let them hunt. If it's ethical, moral, let's let them hunt. We can make it legal. Unless it's controlled by the feds. If it's not controlled by the feds, the commission decides whether it's legal or not, or when, or how many, or how much. So let's let them hunt. And I wish there was some kind of way to kind of get that started on a more national scale, because I would have to expect that most states' wildlife laws were brought about at the turn of the century. Now that's the turn of the 20th century, late 1800s, early 1900s, to curb abuses, which was needed at that time. But say white-tailed deer, let's just take white-tailed deer. It's not true for ducks that we want to talk about today. But white-tailed deer, we've learned to raise white-tailed deer almost like cattle. So we have plenty of white-tailed deer. So let them hunt. We got to make it easier for people to get into hunting.
I agree with you. I think there's, I call them barriers to entry. There are real barriers to entry, and then I think there are perceived barriers to entry. And I agree with you, Terry. I think that as hunters, and the broad industry, I think on the outside it may look more complicated than it is. And you sound like a great ambassador for simplifying and promoting hunting to the public. We need more hunters, that's for sure.
Without question. We do a good job of trying to recruit children into hunting and women into hunting, but nobody really gets too involved in how the regulations in any one given location affect that. And I think that's something that's missing in the world of hunter recruitment.
I think so too. I think youth seasons have been a great thing for youth recruitment, but youth have their own difficulties, right? You take let's take a 12-year-old kid from a non-hunting background, non-hunting family. Think of all the obstacles that they're going to have to overcome to stay hunting. They don't have a car, they can't drive, they're in school, they don't have money. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, Terry, is to shine a light on adult recruitment. Adults have all of those things that I just said a kid doesn't. And guess what? They can recruit their own kids. So if you love kids, teach an adult. But I didn't say
Sure.
get rid of all the youth recruitment programs. Of course not, because they're wonderful. But I do think that as a hunting community, we could find a balance between youth and adult-focused programming, and whatever floats your boat, whatever fits your area that you're from, implement that style of hunting. But focus on those non-hunters and get them in. So Terry, switching over to Mojo, I guess I have this question right on the surface. What is the name? Because Mojo has become, the way Kleenex has become the way people talk about a facial tissue. Mojo has become the way people talk about spinning wing decoys in general. I'm going to get a Mojo. So what is behind the name Mojo?
Well, there is a very, very interesting story that is really tied up into the beginning of Mojo, and so I could answer your question about what Mojo means, or I can go back and circle through how we ended up being Mojo, if whichever one of those that you would want.
Yeah, go for that. That one sounds interesting. Tell us about that one, how it came to be.
One of the questions we get asked often is, what's the story of Mojo? Where did it come from? And, of course, I was there during it, so it doesn't sound that interesting to me, but somehow it turns out to be interesting to other people. But, it involves three people, and that's the three co-founders that I mentioned a while ago. And one of them was me. I was actually the minor one. The more important one was a guy named Murray Crow. And he was the inventor of the original Mojo Mallard. And by the way, Murray is now making a new TV show with our friends over at Duck Dynasty called Duck Treasure. They out treasure hunting. So it's streaming on Fox, on the Fox streaming network. I don't know what it is, but and the other one is a guy named Jeff Simmons, who you would know because he owns Simmons Sporting Goods in Bastrop, Louisiana, which is a huge sporting goods store. But Jeff found out about the spinning wing concept. It came out of California. Mojo did not invent or first recognize the spinning wing concept. It came out of the Valley of California, and in the year 1999, somebody from California brought one of those and went hunting with Jeff Simmons, and he wouldn't even let him put it out in the beginning because it sounded so goofy. And but finally, he let him put it out, and here come the mallards. And so he started telling people about it. And pretty soon, he has this long list of people that wants to buy one. He's in the sporting good business, but he can't get them. So the third player, Murray Crow, he came from Murray and I grew up together. We grew up in very rural northeast Louisiana, about 15 miles from the Mississippi River. And but Murray's always been a tinkerer. He has a degree in agribusiness. His family was big farmers, but his dad and his brother had died, and he got out of the farming business. And he was tinkering around. He built race cars. He built pulling tractors. He raced them. He balanced people's racing motors for him. And Jeff knew he could build anything, so Jeff calls Murray and asked him, can he build him some of these devices? And it was in the middle of duck season, so Murray said, yeah, I'll build them for you. Well, originally, they had a little high-speed motor, and they slowed it down with a little set of pulleys and a rubber band-looking thing to get the wing speed down to the right speed. Well, he didn't know how to size those pulleys and make all that come out right, so he called me, I'm his engineer buddy, and starts telling me about this duck decoy. Now, I'm duck hunting heavy. Murray, his brother and I were big duck hunters, but Murray never liked a duck hunter. He was a deer hunter. And so he kept telling me about this decoy that I couldn't understand. And I said, well, I don't know, Murray, but I can size you pulleys for you. I can get all that stuff straight. I'll just come up to your shop tomorrow at lunch. And so I left the engineering company. I go up there, and we start looking at this device. And the first thing we figured out was that's not the way to make it. So we started talking about a few things. But Murray says, I think I got an idea. I says, come back tomorrow. So, okay, I'll leave. I'll come back tomorrow. Well, Murray took a double-shafted blower motor out of a Caterpillar cab. And most of that stuff back in those days ran on 24-volt. And in DC motors, as compared to the ACs in your house, the speed is proportional to the voltage that you put to it. So you could put a 6-volt battery to this 24-volt motor instead of turning 3,000 RPM, just turning about 700 or 800 is perfect. So and this is a great big old motor, and so he did that, and he took some 040 aluminum, which is what he wrapped race cars with back then, and he made the wings out of it. And so this is a much improved device over what was out there at that time. And so then he says, well, Terry says, I need to put a name on this. And he would come to me for business. He didn't like doing business. He liked building things and inventing things. And he said, I need to put a name on this. And I said, well, okay, what do you want to put on it? And he said, I don't know, help me. And so I said, well, I can tell you this. In corporate America today, it's short, it's simple, it rolls off the tongue. There's no more General Motors, it's GM, it's Microsoft, it's Apple, it's IBM. So he said, okay, I get that. What could I call it? Well, I grew up on a small farm because my parents weren't farmers for primary living, and where Murray's were, so we had a small farm. And on this farm, we had a little device. I don't know what it was, but I think it was somebody's stab at making a garden plow. And it had a motor and a clutch and some handles that you could drive around and like that. And my dad called it a Mojo. And so he'd say, bring that Mojo over here and hook it to this trailer or something like that. I said, you remember that, Murray? He said, yeah. I said, about as roll off the tongue as you can get. He said, yeah, I agree. So I go back to my engineering company, and I have my lady there make him some stickers to go on his motor for these. It says Mojo Mallard. So after the duck season ended, there was no more demand. And let me throw one interesting point in there. However many that Murray and all his buddies in the car business could make in a day, he would deliver at the end of the day to Jeff Simmons Sporting Goods. Jeff had a waiting list. They would come that night and pick them up, so nobody ever owned one for longer than a day. And so at the end of it, I kept trying to get Murray to go into that business because he wasn't doing a whole lot anyway, and he wouldn't do it. And so finally one day I figured out he hates business. I said, Murray, if you want to do this, I'll go into business with you. He said, yeah, we'll do that. So we needed somebody to sell them. I could do the business part of it. Murray could certainly make them. We need a salesman. So we go back and get Jeff Simmons. So now the three of us in March of the year 2000 start the corporate name of this business is Huntwise, but we're just known by Mojo. So I'm going to go back and get taglines made and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and logos and that. So Murray and him is going to get on to making them and all that. So I get my very talented girl to start doing that. And she walks in one day. This is the punchline now, Joe. She walks in one day, says, she called me Denman. Said, Denman, you know what Mojo means? I said, no, ma'am, I ain't got a clue. She said, well, you're the luckiest SOB alive because it means magic. I said, really? So by accident, we named our product a Magic Mallard. But the word Mojo is a voodoo term. And, of course, voodoo in the States is the biggest in, South Louisiana and South Florida, but it's big in Africa and the South Seas country and stuff like that. Well, Mojo, the women back in those days would have a Mojo bag, and in that bag is where they put their little chicken feet and seashells and things like that, and they wore it up under their skirt. You couldn't see it, and it was supposed to bring them good luck, charm. So it turned out to be a charm or something like that until 1960-something. Muddy Waters kind of changed the meaning of it when he said, I got my Mojo working, and he's talking about what the ladies at that time. So now it's used. If you're doing good, you got your Mojo working. If you're not doing good, your Mojo's not working. So
well,
that's the story.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's actually you're right. Other people find that interesting. I found that interesting because it's not just so simple as thought really hard, made a name, and off we went. It's you stumbled upon something great as far as that name goes. That's really awesome. So
yeah, that we did just stumble up on that. It wasn't a thought process that got us there.
So the early I suppose, prototypes and the early products that were for sale, I'm guessing those were Drake mallards? What were they?
They were what? Excuse me.
Were they mallards, and or were they Drake mallards, hen mallards? What did you guys first start to tinker
They were
with?
they were both. When Murray first made them in 1999, he just used whatever he could get his hands on for decoys. But they were all mallards, and mostly drakes. People want drakes more than hens because they're so colored up. And but there were some hens out there. And then in the first year we actually started making them, the closest thing we could come to a landing duck decoy back then was a decoy. Actually, was made by company Flambeau. That's been in business forever. And it was actually a decoy to set on the ground, but it looked like it was kind of in a landing position. And so then all of them were made from that decoy, but both hens and drakes. Back then they ran about 85% drakes and about 15% hens. And then in the next year we molded our own decoy body, and we stayed with the drake and the hen, and they run somewhere in the 80% drake, 20% hen.
Well, I imagine the early ones probably look nothing like the modern one. I'm trying to think of my experiences with motion decoys. Some of the early ones, had the different wing attachments, they had pins, they had different types of batteries. What, I guess maybe hang on that one for a second. Is the modern day Mojo and the early Mojo, do they look similar or vastly different?
They are, I don't know if the word vastly would be different or not, but they're would be correct or not, but they're certainly different, Joel. When we first started off, we would take the motor, and we had this big motor that was really one of our claim to fame. And we bolted that. We'd cut a hole in the back of the decoy body. You'd get in there. We'd bolt the motor into the decoy body. Originally, we had it operate off one of these 6-bolt lantern batteries, and it would have a little set of alligator clips or something like that. They had those little spiral terminals, if you remember that. In fact, I think they probably still make those.
Yep.
And then fairly early on, we got into the CO lead-acid rechargeable batteries, and we made molded a little battery case and put it, riveted it to the inside. Early on, they had a fairly elaborate connection to the pole. It had a big old grip nut on it. It'd cut your finger off if you wasn't careful. And the wings were put on by thumb screws, and that was pretty crude. And we just kind of evolved along to improve that over time. But I will say that since we had the patent protection on those, and hardly nobody else could make them, it didn't force us to improve it as much as we should have. If I could go back and do it again, I would accelerate the refinement, and not only refinement, but the way the thing works up until we do today. Now, our latest series we do now, which we call the Elite Series, we put everything that works inside of a housing. And so it's very smooth and white and that type of stuff. And then we just wrap a semi-flexible skin around it. And actually, you can take the skin off. We do that on TV every now and then. Take the skin off and just put that housing on the pole, and it's just sitting there running, turning the wings. And so you can see that none of it is attached to the body. Because if you think about how they build a car, truck, a motorcycle, anything like that, nobody connects the motor to the body. You connect the motor to the frame, you connect the wheels to the frame, then you wrap the body around it, and it was that concept that brought us to the design of our current Elite system. And it's greatly improved over the original one, but the original ones, that motor and that stuff was so strong and so simply built that it was durable, but it was crude compared to today's products.
Yeah, I kind of, while you were talking about that, I remembered there's a story. So John Devney works for Delta. Do you know John Devney?
I know John, I do, yes.
Yeah, so John...
I duck hunted with John one time.
Okay, yeah, John gets around hunting around the United States and Canada. He's a good duck hunter, but he and I had this tradition, and I've been with Delta 21 years. I think he's been with Delta, I'm going to say 23 or 4. And he and I had this tradition before we were married and before we had kids. We would load up the dogs and decoys in a truck, camping equipment, and we would just drive until we could find a spot to duck hunt, and then we'd camp out in an abandoned farmyard or something. But we were hunting one of our traditional hunts, and I left the decoys for a little while because things were a little bit slow. And while I was gone, John was doing a lot of shooting. And I think he filled up on teal, and then I got back and I filled up on teal. And we got home, and he had already packed up the spinning wing decoy, and it was mine. It was actually my dad's. And so when we got home and I started unpacking my gear, I noticed that I had tons of holes in my decoy and dents actually in the battery. And I'm like, what the heck happened here? So got to work the next day, and I said, John, what's the chances that you shot my decoy? And he didn't even hesitate, and he said, pretty darn good. He said he was tracking a blue-winged teal through it and hoped that he hadn't shot it, but he did. But that thing took a licking and kept on going. So it's I guess that's a testament to some of the earlier versions. They were very tough. The only thing I think I had trouble with was kind of the rubber band. If that would get weathered and break, then I could find some shortcuts with rubber bands or other things, but largely inoperable at that moment. But Terry, I think some of the stories that I hear, I was not an early adopter of the motion decoys. I think I found myself, I don't know if a traditionalist is what I wanted to say, but I did, and I do use one. They work so well. But Terry, some of the stories that I hear is that the early use of spinning wing decoys, it brought in untold number of ducks into the spread. But then I've started to hear different stories of maybe they're not as effective as they used to be. How do you view kind of the duck's behavior towards a spinning wing decoy? Has it changed over time, or how would you summarize that?
Absolutely would be the word I would use, Joel. When they first came out, I remember the very first time I took one. When Murray started building these, and I was helping him along a little bit, I had never heard of anything like this. I didn't really believe in it. So I got one of the very first ones, and me and just one other guy, it was during the week, so not many people hunting. We go down to our farm. We have a farm down in Catahoula Parish. It's a good duck farm, and we was killing a lot of ducks, and then that would have been the year 99. And so I put it out. I can remember, Joel, it was just barely gray. You couldn't see much. I go out and I put this thing out, and I can remember looking around to see it, make sure nobody was looking at me, even though in the area that I was, nobody could be looking at. That's how suspicious I was of that device. And then I just start slowly wading back to it. We were in a pit line out in the water, and because it wasn't quite shooting line, and I hear, I look around, I bet there was 40 mallards landing on top of that thing. And so for the rest of that season, we would kill and limit most days. We didn't have a very good place to hunt, but we would instead of being through at 9:30 in the morning, we'd be through at 7:30 or 8 in the morning. So they were fantastic back then. But fortunately for all of us, ducks learned, and they learned what a spinning wing decoy was. Not totally, but I don't know if you want to get into that today or not. But a spinning wing decoy's highest and best use is and always was long range attraction.
Okay.
And to me, in decoy, you got to break down long range attraction and lifelike decoy spread to some extent. And so in the early beginnings, those things proved to be a great finishing tool, even though that's not really their purpose. Their purpose is long-range attraction. And so when they got to where they wasn't such a good finishing tool, because when the duck gets there, it's my belief that they learn to recognize that it's just too much flash for a natural duck. When they see it from a distance, they don't. But when they get close, it's so much flash that they learn that, and they shy away from it. And actually, that's good. We could have we could kill too many ducks, I guess, if they kept on behaving like they did in the first year or two. So I think it's changed a good bit since then.
Okay, one of the things that I guess we're kind of wandering, but down in a general direction, Terry, is that, where I live in North Dakota, right? So we hunt a lot of fields, a lot of water. But what we find, and I'm looking at your website, MOJOOutdoors.com, and there's nothing on there about geese. Well, I think one of the things that we find, Terry, behaviorally, and I'm sure it seems to be a universal experience, is that ducks love that spinning wing action, but the geese tend not to, right? And so most of the guys that I hunt with have the remote control. Here come the geese. Turn off the spinner. Is that a universal experience for hunters?
Yes, it is. Geese beat their wings considerably slower than a duck does, and so they don't produce that strobe or flash. That's the reason that the spinning wing decoy works so well on ducks and other birds that produce that flash with their wings. And so, I have killed geese with a spinning wing decoy running, but then there's probably more times when they don't want to come up there close to it. So the smart thing to do is turn it off when the geese start coming. It's certainly not attracting them. It may or may not make them flare, but it's not attracting them because geese don't make that flash.
Yeah, so some of the early years, again, I guess they were extremely effective, right? It just almost felt like, I remember ducks running into spinners, in some of the fields, flying right into them. And then maybe they're not as effective. And I hear that mostly from a southern duck hunter's perspective, that maybe some of the older birds have seen that spinner in the past. They've had a negative experience, coming into a decoy spread. Do you see some of that, Terry? Just maybe not as effective, but still effective?
Well, it's certainly not as effective as a finishing device. Okay, so it's still effective as a long range device. And so yes, I agree with that. But by the time a duck gets to Louisiana, and it's even a juvenile, it's seen everything. So it's been exposed to all kinds of different things. And if the biologists are correct, and they usually are, most of those ducks are being led around by aged hens, and so the aged hens certainly know that. And but we tell people, and I'm convinced this is correct, Joel, that if they don't want to finish it over, instead of turning it off or not taking it that day or something, you're better off to take it with you and put it outside your spread. If they don't want to come within 60 yards of it, put it 60 yards outside your spread. We have actually put it on dry pasture back behind us, because then you get to take advantage of the long-range attraction without having to suffer the effects of they don't want to land that close to it. But certainly they catch on to it, and that's good. That's good. I don't think it would have been good for any of us had it stayed as effective as it was in that first couple of years. It's just not good for the duck population.
That's actually a really good point. It really is. Yeah, and I think I think the key there, as hunters, right? We don't want to make it too easy on ourselves, and you do actually want to keep the craft of hunting. Maybe picking, innovating when it comes to locations, innovating when it comes to the spread. If it was just as simple as stick out a spinner and shoot your limit every day, you're right, that wouldn't be good for the resource, and I'm so glad to hear that come from you. I do want to point out one thing here. They're actually spinning on the table here at the booth is the flock of flicker. Is that right?
Flock of flickers, yes.
Yeah, and the ones sitting on the booth are for doves, and I think it's a very different. It's probably, I'm trying to describe. It's like two hockey pucks stacked on top of each other, with a little blade that periodically spins. Right? It's on and off, and they're pretty cool. But I see that you guys are coming out with a version of that for ducks. Are they out yet, or are they coming out?
Actually, they were out about 3 years ago, and the flock of flicker concept I developed by watching ducks on the water or the dry field, pretty good sized flock of ducks. And they constantly exercise their wings, and you see that, Joe. You see them just raise up and beat your wings for a second and so, and then go back down. or when they backpedal in the land, they make the same flash. So if you watch a flock of contented ducks on the water or on the dry ground, it's just a constant little few second flash that just kind of randoms through the flock. As different ones do it in different locations, I kind of like it lightning bugs, what you see when you see lightning bugs. And if you go back to my statement earlier where I say that as a duck gets closer to a spinning wing decoy, often they learn that that's just too much flash, it's too much continuous flash. And so I worked for quite a few years trying to come out with how I could duplicate that little flash through the decoy spread, and that came out to be the flock of flickers. It's a flicker, it's a flicker through a flock. And that's what it did. Originally, they came in a pack of 6, and each 6 had different timers. So you scatter them through your decoys, and it makes these little random flickers. And that thing's turning very, very fast. And by the way, while we're on it, one thing we try to educate people to, the faster you turn those wings, the more effective it is. And if you let it get down below a certain RPM, it's not making that flash anymore. But we've had some troubles with the very first one of them. It's hard to keep the moisture out of them. You can make a waterproof case, but the thing's got a motor shaft sticking up through the middle of them. It's hard to keep that completely waterproof. You can keep the water out of it. You can't keep the moisture out of it, and we had some problem with them, so we took them off the market and totally redone them. And that's actually one of our new products for this year is a Flock of Flicker 2.
Okay, and that's what I was looking at there. Got it.
Yeah, we beefed them up pretty much, and actually I sent you a video on email this morning. You probably hadn't had time to look at it, so some of the testing we were doing on those Flock of Flickers. But it's been probably the most popular thing that we've done in our 22-year history, other than the original spinning wing decoy and the Mojo Dove, and the next thing would probably be this Flock of Flicker.
Yeah, I think what I like about them, and I don't have one, but when you take the blade, or the small blade that's sitting on top of it, you take that off, you can throw that in your pocket, and for me, I like to be simple when I hunt. I have friends who have 20-foot cargo trailers full of decoys and all kinds of things, and blinds, and I like to go just the opposite. I remember, if you remember those FUDs, fold-up decoys, Blackwater used to make them. I bought a couple dozen of those and put them in a backpack, and so this is right up my alley, so I would encourage people to look at that. Looking at your website, Terry, I see, you have some other products that mostly spinners, the ducks, the doves. I do see a turkey decoy. What are some of the other products that you've expanded to offer the public?
Well, we're in the waterfowl world. We make a bag line, as do most companies, and one of our really popular items is a device called a pick stick. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not.
I see
but
that.
It's a
magnetic.
It's a magnetic pickup stick, but it's specially designed. You pick up about 20 cases at about 20 holes at a time. That's a real popular product. But we made products along the way for water motion. I think that's very, very important. Is water motion. We have a new product this year. It's not shipped to dealers yet, but it will in the next couple of months, and it's a water motion decoy, but it's probably the most what word would I use here? It's probably the most aggressive one that will be on the market. We tried all kind of different things. We tried this stuff with got the bilge pump on the bottom, squirting water up, and that's a good product. And we don't make that product anymore, but we made it for years. And we made just an old jerk cord, things like that. But you need water motion. But I don't know if you remember a product that was on the market some years ago called the Mallard Machine.
Yeah.
We did not invent that. We bought that company. It was made there up in Arkansas, up at Rogers, Arkansas, by Walmart. And but it was one of the few duck products that I had seen that I said, I know that product helped me kill a duck. And so I watch those products like that. A lot of products help and everything, but every now and then there's a product that says, I know that helped me kill a duck. Spinning wing decoy is one of them. You know, you can look and see that it helped you kill a duck. That one did, but it wasn't user friendly, and so the sales just kind of dribbled down to where we stopped making it. And so we've taken that concept. That thing had a trolling motor. You remember it had a trolling motor with a prop on it, sticking straight up. When you energized it, it took the prop down underwater, pulled it down under. It made these decoys. It floated on decoys. It made these decoys dive, and it made lots of water motion, and it would actually have to kill a duck. You know, we have simplified that concept to where it's a standalone unit, just one piece. And you punch the button, set it in the water. It's got a little prop motor, the prop on the bottom of it. It's got a butt up on top of it. It makes that butt up dive and duck and bob around, and it's got very specifically designed on and off cycles, and where it makes it give it the correct action, look like a feeding duck making ripples on the water. So I think that's going to be a fantastic product for us.
Yeah, I think so. You know, it was kind of funny. Our marketing director is really silly smart when it comes to analytics, and so she was sharing with me, I think it was the top 10, maybe the top 5 ways that people end up on our website. Like, what do they type in a search engine and end up on Delta Waterfowl's website? And I think it was top 5 was how to make a jerk rig. And so, you know, the concept of motion is as old as duck hunting is, right? And so, you know, you guys offer a much simpler way and quicker way of adding motion to the spread. But yeah, I think one of the top 5 ways that I would, you know, if I'm going to give someone a tip on to have more success, I would just say, make sure you have motion, because ducks never sit still. Before we skip over too far, I do want to point out it's maybe kind of, I feel like a public service announcement, that magnetic stick, what did you call that, pick-a-stick?
It's a pick stick.
Pick stick. That thing is, you know, obviously Delta spends a lot of time talking about hunter recruitment, but, you know, one of the barriers that hunters can face is getting access to land from a private landowner. And if you want to lose access to a property, one of the fastest ways to lose access is not picking up your holes. The other one is probably getting stuck or ripping up the property or doing something like that. But I think that is a good opportunity. You guys offer a product that helps people retrieve their holes. I mean, if you're out there on private land, public land, pick up your holes, take a look at that pick stick. I think it makes it a lot easier, because, you know, a lot of the times when we're out hunting, it's cold. And so to stick your hand in the water and pick up those floating holes, this looks like a great alternative for that, and be responsible. So one last thing, Terry, I think before we wrap up, I see on your website, you know, there's all the different types of products that you have there. You can also get parts, you know, through your website. But I also see Watch Mojo TV. Where can people, is that YouTube, or is that actually out on television?
It's on television. It's been on there for, I think we're somewhere around maybe the 14th or 15th year. It airs on the Sportsman Channel. We also air another version of it in the fall, in the third and fourth quarter, only on Pursuit Channel. But our main show airs on Sportsman Channel. And then, of course, we got, you know, you can find most of those videos on our website. We put a lot of the short stuff. We cherry pick short stuff out of it, and make social media posts out of them, just the really good stuff. You know. But the TV show itself is airs on Sportsman Channel.
Yeah, I haven't had cable since college, and that's about 25, 30 years ago. So yeah, it's I'm not super well versed, and so I just wanted to make sure that people knew where to find that. And you know, I think it's a good opportunity to probably, you know, just be entertained, learn some tips, see the motion decoys in action, and get some ideas for yourself. Well, Terry, I'm actually we're gonna wrap this up a little bit here. You and I are gonna have another podcast chat just to give everyone a preview. We're gonna talk more about duck hunting, and you know, I think as a lifelong duck hunter in the South, and as you said, all over the world, I do want to learn, you know, from your perspective, you know, kind of a timeline on how hunting has changed over time, but obviously maybe some of the ways that it hasn't changed, and maybe the way it's the same. And so we'll pick that up in another conversation. But Terry, thank you to Mojo for sponsoring this podcast booth. And like I said, I'm going to send you a picture of what it looks like. I wish you were here, but I totally understand that We can't be in two places at one time. For everyone, Terry Denmon, owner, co-founder of MOJO Outdoors. Go to mojooutdoors.com and learn all about it, and run down to your local sporting goods store and pick up some of their products. Terry, anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I just appreciate you having me on here, and I know y'all gonna have a great show up there, and I really feel bad that I can't be there. Not only I would rather done this podcast in person, but just to enjoy the expo that you have in there. So, from the social media post I have seen, you have a lot of good people there. So, people ought to come out and check you out.
Well, appreciate that, and also, like I said, Terry, we talked about products, we talked about your business, but again, you're a staunch conservation advocate, and thank you for that. And I really admire folks in the industry that give back, and you certainly give back, and thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Enjoyed it. My
Okay,
pleasure.
All right. Thanks a lot, Terry. We're going to sign off. Everyone, take care.